Secretary sent out an email to the conveners a few weeks back suggesting that as this is the convocation meeting for the convention, that it would be better to postpone elections until the spring meeting, and we all agreed. So, and in fact in our convocation it actually makes sense, because I was completing a year's term for Father Jonathan. Martha's term does not end until next year, so it means that if we have the elections in the spring convocation meeting, we can get stuff back into sync again. So there will be no elections this evening. Those of you who are interested in taking the office of convener or co-convener and all the other things will have ample time to consider them and let us know before the spring convocation meeting. The other thing that's going on right now in the convocation is the acolyte trip to Washington Cathedral on the 10th of October. We have so far, if I can remember the numbers right, about 46 people going on the coaches, or on the coach, acolytes, supporters, people who just want to go and visit Washington Cathedral. The deadline for registration is the 25th of September. So those of you who wish to send acolytes and people, you've got until then to register. You do it yourself either through your parish or on your own through the Washington Cathedral website. I will be sending out more details, instructions on what the day is going to look like in the next week to 10 days. The coach is scheduled to leave here at 7 a.m. on the morning of the 10th, and we plan to leave the cathedral to come back, providing we can round everybody up, by 4 p.m. So this is the first time that I've got people going from St. Edward's, and I know there's someone going from St. James, there's a group going from St. John's, there's a group that's going from St. Paul's, Columbia. So all you other folks, I believe St. Thomas are going to let me know if they've got anybody going by Monday. The 25th is the deadline. We really need to sort of nail it down. So if you can, if you have any questions, come and see me or email me, and I'll be happy to give you more details. But you can find all the information that you need about the festival itself on the Washington Cathedral website.
Several of you have asked if I've recovered yet from the events of last weekend. The truth is that I am still buzzing from the events of this past weekend. It was so glorious, and I think that's really the word. The liturgy was amazing. The banquet on Friday night, when we got to hear the stories of ministries and mission projects from around the diocese. Sunday at the cathedral, when I got to bang on the door. It's all been just a joy. And so many of you have played such an important part in this, from planning it, poor Kate. Kate, who painstakingly worked to plan the liturgy, all of the different receptions, and those of you who were in the congregation, I just can't thank you enough. It's been a wonderful and joyous time. And Tuesday, I showed up at the office and we just kept going. So I feel as though I'm being folded into the life of this diocese that's already up and running well. And so it's a joy for me to just come into step with you and begin this work. It's really, really good. Several of you have said, well, what should we call you? And please call me by my baptismal name, which is Audrey. I don't stand on too much ceremony, and yet I do appreciate the fact that for some people, particularly children, that there's an interest in being respectful. And so if you need to use Bishop Scanlon, please feel free. Some of you have also asked about making appointments with me, and I've heard, well, I don't really have anything specific I need to talk to you about, but I'd just like to come spend some time. And I would welcome that. You don't need to be in crisis to come to my office, please. It would be great just to invite you to come and spend time with me. Tonight, what I wanted to offer as a word of introduction is to invite us to think about this meeting as a holy moment. I think that often in the church we have a way of separating our liturgical way of being and our liturgical functioning. We separate that sometimes from the business of the church, and we think that this is for prayer and this is for work, and ne'er the twain shall meet. And so what I'd like to invite us to do tonight is to follow what my friend Tom Brackett, he's the ministry developer in New York, he calls it spirit tracking. Spirit tracking. And it's a little corny, the phrase, but what I'd like for us to do tonight as we hear the presentations, as we look at the budget and see the numbers, as we consider resolutions, to be aware of and look for God at work among us tonight in this meeting. You'll see on the agenda that there's also closing remarks from your bishop, and I will be inviting us to offer up the reflections of where we might have seen God tonight in this meeting. God is present because there's more than 2 or 3 gathered here tonight. So thank you for having me. This is the first Convocation meeting I've been to, so I'm excited to see how it shakes out.
Well, we all know how tirelessly Linda Arguedas works to put together all the logistics for the convention. So in her stead, I am here just to share some words about the internet, use of the internet, that you can find all your materials there, and a little bit about the schedule itself. So Friday evening, we will be at the Blair County Convention Center. Registration does begin at 4 p.m. And of course there will be what we always call light refreshments available for you. We know that some of you will be traveling far. The keynote session begins at 6:30 p.m. With our bishop, and there'll be a networking reception that will follow the evening session. So in addition to Friday evening, there is a space. If you have not made your hotel reservations, Linda wanted me to stress this, that there are still some options, but because it is parent night at Penn State, she asked, yes, I knew that would happen, because you know how the hotels, even in Altoona, are all the rooms are taken. So she still has a few rooms that are booked and blocked for us. So if you haven't made your reservations, please do it as soon as possible. Thank you. We will end on Friday evening with Compline, and I understand from Linda that there will be a dessert buffet that will be offered after Compline. We will also on Friday evening have breakout sessions, and those breakout sessions will follow Audrey's presentation. So again, we'll be engaged in discussion, and mapping the way is our convention theme. So we're really looking forward to that. So Saturday, the opening Eucharist begins at 9 a.m. at St. Luke's, Altoona. And then we travel from St. Luke's, Altoona back to the Blair County Convention Center, and we will begin at 11 a.m. So the idea is we gather in the church, say our prayers, celebrate Eucharist, and then return to the convention center. For those who cannot come on Friday night and are arriving on Saturday morning, registration will be open at 10 a.m. at the convention center. In other words, if you are traveling early Saturday and you miss the Eucharist celebration at St. Luke's, you are invited to go over and register. Any questions? Did I miss something, Kate?
I was looking around at the website. Is there a cutoff for the online registration? I did not see a date.
I didn't either, and I looked today to try to get as much information as possible. So, but the idea is register now. Register now if you have not. It's still, yes, it's still open, I knew that. I just didn't know if there was a cutoff date. Maybe I looked today and I couldn't find one, so. But do make sure you register. Next part will be, if we can go to the nominations. And I'm going to ask Hank if you will lead us in the discussion around the nominations, please.
Thank you, Robin. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Hank Morrow, and I'm the deacon here at St. Edward's. You can find the nominations on the website, and they're under nominated candidates. There's biographies there. Strange fellow. So we'll begin reviewing the nominations. The brief description of what the Council of Trustees does. They hold the title to all the real estate and assets owned by the diocese and have full power to deal with the real estate and assets after consultation with the bishop. In addition, the Council of Trustees shall possess all of the powers and duties granted by the law of Pennsylvania to nonprofit corporations. The body of individuals is answerable to the annual convention, which is the governing body of the corporation of the diocese. The council has the power to make bylaws, rules, policies, procedures, provided that they are not repugnant with the Constitution and laws of the United States or the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and the Constitution of the Episcopal Church or the diocese. This year we will be electing one person from the clergy and one person from the laity. The nominations are, and if you would stand if you're here, and forgive me if I mispronounce your name. The clergy nomination is yours truly. And from the lay, we have Mr. Samuel Fleming, Mrs. Beth Rumpel, Mr. Christopher Nicholas, Mrs. Dorothy Catman, and Mrs. James Gable. Thank you.
Go to the next office.
So you're the only clergy person on.
I'm the only one, so I guess I won. I beg for people, for some unknown reason, people just shy away from this particular thing. Okay, next is the Ecclesiastical Discipline Board. And we elect one member from the clergy and two members of the laity. The powers and duties and procedures of the disciplinary board established shall be governed by Title IV of the National Canons of the Episcopal Church, which states that each diocese shall, by canon, create a court known as the disciplinary board as described in the canon, which is kind of redundant. No member of the disciplinary board is eligible to serve concurrently on the standing committee or the finance committee. Nominations are yours truly again. The Reverend Howie Saucer, the Reverend Canon David Lovelace, and from the lay, we have Mrs. Stacy Cagano and Mr. Robert Simmons. Thank you, Robert. And the final election is for standing committee. On standing committee, we elect two clergy and two lay. The powers of the standing committee are the ecclesiastical authority of the diocese when there is no bishop or bishop coadjutor. They fill in vacancies that may occur during recess of the annual convention. They fill vacancies in such offices as held by the annual elections unless otherwise provided for. They perform the duties as directed by convention and defined in the canons, and they exercise all the joy, power, authority, and duties conferred upon the Standing Committee by the Constitution and national canons of the Church. The clergy nominations are the Reverend Laurie Kerr, the Very Reverend Churchill Pinder, and the Reverend Canon Kate Harrigan. And late, Mrs. Carolyn Faust, Mrs. Charlotte Weaver Gelser, Mr. David Morath, Ms. Tara Kelly Johnson, Mr. John M. Stevenson, and Mrs. Shannon M. Burnett. Thank you.
The next, we want to draw your attention, next thing we want to draw your attention to is the reports. The reports are very, we're not going to go through all the reports, Martha, but thank you, but they are all on the web. And to me, it's really important, even from a formation perspective, that when we begin talking budget, to look at what all has happened in the diocese, in particular ministry areas. And so there's an extensive amount of reports. Our encouragement is that you look at them and you consider the work that has been done and the work as it's moving forward. Any questions about that? So just click on, and you can click, but we won't go through them all.
And you can download them.
And you can download them, put them in a notebook, depending on your generational preference. Or you can take it on your iPad and read it there. But so there they are. Any questions about the reports? Okay, well then the next presentation, Veronica has asked Kate to do the presentation of the resolutions.
We have 8 resolutions this time. More resolutions than I can remember coming to convention before. But as you'll see, there is there's some synthesis to it, and there's a certain amount of sense in how and what is being presented through these resolutions. 3 of them come from the cathedral, and 5 of them come out of the General Convention deputation as a response to General Convention, and I've forgotten a little bit. 3 of them are inspired by St. Stephen's Cathedral, and some are inspired by General Convention, and the call to join what our new presiding bishop calls the Jesus movement. One of the things that I came away from General Convention with was a very strong sense of Bishop Curry's instructions to us to go into the world, and very evangelistic, but also a very strong sense of, when we go into the community, being involved in the community. And you'll see that reflected in the resolutions. Here is the Hall of Deputies. Hundreds of people working on these, but it didn't all start there. They started before we got there, worked in committees at convention, and when they got to the floor, there was a certain sense of completion of the resolutions that got to the floor. And all of the resolutions that are coming from the General Convention deputation are based upon resolutions that have come from General Convention. Where did that come from? Okay, we're going to listen, discuss, and prepare to respond at Diocesan Convention. One of the things. Here we are at convention. We often broke into small groups, and one of the things that also happened was that the bishops and the deputies met together this time more often than we had in the past, and had opportunities to sit, as you see, around the table here. And here we have It's part of our convention. There's David. And it was also, the folks that were sitting behind us were from Southeast Florida, and you may see a familiar face in there. So we were able to sit and talk in small groups, and we are hoping, I think, in our conversations on Friday night at our own convention, to be able to have those small group conversations. Well, now, we're not going to vote by these wonderful little digital electronic things that we all had to learn to vote with. It was great fun. But one of these days we will be technologically so competent that we will just push a button to vote. Our first one comes out of the cathedral, engagement with the church and the community. And as you can see, it says, resolve that each parish of the Diocese of Central Pennsylvania be encouraged to do 3 things to support its engagement with the local community. So once again, this is moving beyond the walls of the church to engage in the community. This one has a flavor of evangelism with it, to create and share a clear message of their church's mission, be known in the community, to develop a plan of financial stability, and to partner with other institutions and individuals of the community. That's the first one. These are all in their entirety on the website. And once again, as before, I do urge you to read them, to download them. I've got them in my iPad to print them out, whatever it takes. Number 2 is care of God's creation. The cathedral has put up 2 resolutions that have to do with the stewardship of creation. This is the first one. And this one's very specific, resolves that each parish in the Diocese of Central Pennsylvania be encouraged to study the health of its local watershed and partner with other institutions in the community in specific efforts of environmental education and actions. We live along the Susquehanna River, which flows into the Chesapeake. We actually live in a critical area for keeping the watershed healthy. Stewardship of God's creation resolved that each parish of the Diocese of Central Pennsylvania be encouraged to help sponsor and have its members participate in energy-efficient education and workshops, being aware of energy use, how to use energy better, how to be more responsible, and really be good stewards of God's creation. So those are the 3 that came out of the cathedral. Resolution 4 is to create a committee on social justice and equity that the Bishop Diocesan recommend to the Council of Trustees the formation of a committee called the Committee on Social Justice and Equity, bringing together established groups. We have a number of different groups throughout the diocese that meet that have at their heart social justice and equity. And we also are inspired to create other subgroups that would be part of this larger group that really focuses on social justice and equity. This was a very strong theme at convention. Quality education for all. That we take Christ into our neighborhoods by endorsing church-school partnerships as a way to address education inequity in our Commonwealth. I don't know how many churches are actually doing this. I think there are some churches throughout the diocese that have these relationships with local public schools to help strengthen the school and to respond to the needs of children and youth in our communities. This is based, each one of these are based on resolutions that came out of General Convention, and they are listed on the website, the whole resolution that came from General Convention, so that you can see what the inspiration for it was. Number 6, using education policy and community dialogue to respond to all forms of racial injustice. That the Diocesan Task Force on Eliminating Racism be tasked with developing activities to be used by congregations, convocations, youth groups, and at diocesan-wide events to engage one another and to educate our diocese on the issues involved in all forms of racial injustice. There's more to that as well. This is a critical issue. It was brought up at General Convention as truly racial injustice being a critical issue, and we are surrounded by it here. So this one is very specifically addressed to that social issue of racial injustice. Abolish the death penalty in Pennsylvania. Call upon Governor Tom Wolf to continue the death penalty moratorium he has placed in effect and to introduce and support legislation to eliminate the death penalty in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Very often we come away with resolutions that we feel that regardless of how we vote, we don't have the end result in that. We, the Episcopal Church, can't abolish the death penalty. However, we do have the ability to put pressure on the legislature. Wolf has called for a moratorium. This comes out again from a resolution through General Convention about abolishing the death penalty in the states where that has not been done yet. And ours is one of the states where it has not been done yet. And the Episcopal Church has stood fairly firmly on its stance to abolish the death penalty. And number 8, safe environment, the alcohol policy that the 145th Convention of the Diocese of Central Pennsylvania requests that the Bishop Diocesan appoint a task force on alcohol and substance abuse, and I believe there's already a beginning of that, to study General Convention Resolution A158 entitled Substance Abuse, Addiction, and Recovery. And within this resolution are some guidelines for how we as parishes and as a diocese can create a safe space, a safe environment, and respond to the issues of alcoholism in the church. Are there any questions? Yes,
Can you, in maybe 1.5 sentences on number 5, just give the rationale that explains separation of church and state in relation to that?
Do you know that is something that actually came up at convention as well? And hold on a second. Let me, because I've got it here in front of me. Sorry. What was determined was that it really was not an issue of the separation of church and state, so much as it was the church being able to support and help, as we are asked to do in public schools. Let me just see if this helps. Resolve the House of Bishops concurring that the 78th General Convention endorse church-school partnerships as a path for following Jesus into the neighborhood, addressing educational inequity, and rejuvenating congregations. There is an All Our Children national network that works to address the problem of children and poverty in schools. And essentially what we're asking ourselves is not to go in and proselytize, but to go in and to support these children in schools. Does anybody else who was at convention want to respond to that? David?
There's an excellent explanatory document that goes into it on the website if you click on the resolution under Diocesan Convention Resources, then you get the full background, but the statement is throughout congregations are revitalized, as you say, providing direct services to children, building community coalitions, and participating in these events. That gives us a really good, and then you click on the report, and you're there. So everything you need for the understanding of the resolution in its context is embedded within it, with the diocesan website.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes?
I just have an example in Lancaster City. A couple churches are providing before and after school programs. For one, we have adopted the closest school. And also, we welcome the teachers on their first day back and offer them a luncheon on their first in-service day, which is real supportive of the teachers and helping with the club uniforms.
And some churches do the backpack program for schools.
Yes.
I know that at St. Paul's, we've talked about starting a reading program to help with reading. Anybody else? Yes, Jane.
I'm on the ministerium. I'm in the ministerium here in Manhattan Township where I live. And another example is one of the churches is having an after-school program, and the school district is actually going to bus the kids there. So it's really about being a presence in the community to help, wherever we're heading. They have a huge gym and they're opening up to the kids after school. And so we're not getting in there to proselytize, which we're not allowed to do, but we certainly can support what they do, their educational program.
Thank you. Does that help answer that? Thank you. And thank you for asking the question, because it's a good question and it is one that came up at convention. Any other questions? Yes.
Will there be opportunity to amend the resolution?
Yes, there's always opportunity to amend. One of the reasons for presenting these at Convocation is so that you can have a look at them, be familiar with them. The names of the people who have crafted them are on the bottom. You can always get in touch with those people with any questions about it. And when these come to the floor of convention, there's an opportunity then to amend them. Yes, thank you.
Any other questions about convention? Yes, oh, sorry, Lauren?
Will there be nominations from the floor for any of the positions, or?
Canonically, no. It's closed. I was just looking to make sure if I answered no, I was writing it down. Okay. Any other questions about convention? If not, we're going to Stephen for the budget.
I have one round.
Yes, oh, sorry, Lauren?
Will there be nominations from the floor for any of the positions, or?
Canonically, no. It's closed. I was just looking to make sure if I answered no, I was writing it down. Okay. Stephen?
It would probably help. The person who usually presents the budget is Bonnie Chambers, who is the treasurer of the diocese. I'm not sure how many of you are aware, but Bonnie's husband was very recently diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and so Bonnie is having to devote all her time to her husband and family matters. So what we have decided in the Finance Committee is I will be presenting the budget, and Finance Committee issues or matters at this convocation and also up in Lewisburg, and we have other members of the Finance Committee who will be doing it at other convocation meetings. Let me say right up front, I am not going to go through a line-by-line presentation of the 2015 and 2016 budget. If you want to do that, you can do it at your own leisure and then send me or Bill Graffius emails with any questions that you may have. What I do want to do this evening is to give you some background to the rationale behind the 2016 budget and some of the things that we have been doing in the Finance Committee. As you are well aware, about 18 months, 2 years ago, we started, Bill Graffius and myself started with Bonnie Chambers to take a close look at not only how the Finance Committee functions, but also how the finances of the diocese function. I'm pleased to report that this year we've managed to recruit 3 new people to the Finance Committee. that we think is not only has strengthened the Finance Committee, but I think helps us move forward. Father Herb Sprouse, who is the Rector of Prince of Peace in Gettysburg, has joined us. David Pock, who is a member of Trinity Williamsport, has joined us. And Rob Jones, who comes from the Cathedral, has joined us. All three of these bring considerable financial expertise to the table, not least of which in the case of investments. And we have reconvened and redesigned the investment committee of the Finance Committee to be able to track and monitor and handle the diocesan investments. In that regard, we are about to move the diocesan investments away from BNY Mellon to the Episcopal Church Foundation. The purpose for that is not only does the Episcopal Church Foundation offer far more peripheral things for the diocese, but we feel that they understand church finances better than BNY Mellon, and we've been with an awful long time. We'll be making more announcements of that, and one of our goals is to try and sit down with the finance chairs and the rectors of those congregations that have investments with BNY Mellon. We won't be touching those. Those are still owned by the congregations. We're moving the diocesan investments. But anyone who wants to move over can do so, but we want to get into conversation with you to make sure that you're fully available. You understand what our rationale is, and we can also seek your advice. So that's one of the things that's been going on. One of the ongoing things with Bill Graffius and Barney, mainly Bill Graffius, is to try and make the budget more accessible. I've been in this diocese for over 20 years, and I've got to admit that for years I would just look at the diocesan budget and my eyes would glaze over. And trying to find where certain things were and where connections were was not always easy. We're trying to simplify that so that you can actually identify key areas. You can identify where the staff are involved and so on. And much of that has been the work of Bill Graffius and the 2016 budget, which you can find, both the 2015 and the 2016. The 2016 is up now. You can also find the 2015 budget is online, will reflect some of those changes, but it's still ongoing. The other thing that Barney Chambers has been doing, God bless her soul, it's been a phenomenal exercise in investigative accounting, is to track all the various investments that we have and all the designated funds and track where they came from, who made them, what is accessible, what isn't accessible, what's usable, what can be folded in, and so on. We have found stuff that went back to the Diocese of Harrisburg that had never been changed. We found funds for Bishop McNutt. We found funds for Bishop Stevenson. We're slowly getting all those things together, and as much information as we can, we put on the website. This is not secret stuff. We're trying to be as transparent as we possibly can to make sure this stuff goes out there. At the same time, as some people already in this room know, we are willing to engage in dialogue and meet with them person to person if that helps explain where we are. We've been in a long conversation with the Council of Trustees to try and ensure that when we start to build the budget up in the future, that actually those commissions and ministries that want money from the budget actually have to present it. When I first started in this finance business, when I was on the Congregational Development Board, every February, every commission and ministry that wanted something from the budget had to meet with the Council of Trustees. You would have done that, you remember it well? We had to meet with the Council of Trustees, we had to present our budget and defend our budget. And it was after that meeting that the Finance Committee would then sit down and begin to put up a budget that would then go to the Council of Trustees for final approval. We're trying to reinstate something like that. So there's much more accountability in terms of the budget preparation. much more accountability from the individuals who want the money, and much more accountability from the Council of Trustees who decide who gets to use that, and so on. So all of that is in the pipework. Some of it's already happening, and we try and post as much of that information as we can on the diocesan website. When it came to doing the 2016 budget, not an awful lot has changed. Not an awful lot has changed. The way we started this time is there is a sort of an executive committee, the finance committee, that's Audrey, myself, Bill Graffius, and Bonnie Chambers. And we sit down with the figures that Bill Graffius provides us with. Audrey was there to have her input. Bonnie was there, I was there. We came to a very clear conclusion very early on. There were certain options that we could follow in preparing the 2016 budget. We knew full well that if we accepted it as it is, there would be a deficit, a substantial deficit. Initially, we were looking at about $150,000 deficit. So we could accept that. The other thing that we could do is say, no, we're not going to accept that. So we'll cut staff and we'll cut programs. And if you look at the budget, there isn't an awful lot of wiggle room. If you consider that the operating grant subcommittee of congregational development accounts for $140,000 of program, and that the staff costs are close to $750,000, you ain't got much wiggle room. So we could cut program, and that would balance the budget. We could pull down more than we are really advised to do from the investments. The limit is 7%, Act 141. We could go the full 7. We decided we were going to go for about 3%. We could even pull more down and go into capital. We could do that. We could do a combination of those things to make budget. Or we could just accept it for what it is. And we came to the conclusion that we have a new bishop. And the bishop needs time to get to know the diocese. The bishop needs time to talk to the various people in the diocese. The bishop needs time to decide with the Council of Trustees and the Standing Committee and all the other committees and commissions that exist, what is the ministry of the diocese? Before we start bringing out the carving knife and chopping things out. We also knew that we had in the general fund about $350,000 to draw. So we came to the conclusion around that table that we would go in with a deficit, knowing full well that during the course of the year that would probably be reduced. As programs work themselves out and as the year works itself out, you've all been there. I'm budgeting a $30,000 deficit for next year. And I'm pretty sure some of you around the table are doing exactly the same thing. So we decided to do that, and that's what we would present to the Council of Trustees, with the clear intention that this is time for Audrey and us to look closely at our ministry and decide what it is our ministry will be. And then when we start to sit down and look at the 2017 budget, they will be much more accountable from the various missions and ministries and commissions that will be wanting money. And that the Council of Trustees will take a much closer hands-on approach to that budget preparation. So the initial iteration that went out to the Council of Trustees showed a deficit of about $150,000. If you look at this budget, you'll find it's already gone down to just a little over $100,000. And my guess is it will probably go down less than that sometime during the course of 2016. So that's the budget. You can take a look at it. There are some things that you probably haven't been made aware of, or maybe only recently. The Congregational Operating Grant, which currently stands at 140,000. This is for congregations that apply for an operating grant to meet their ministry. Some of you around this table represent congregations that receive operating grants. There is also, and has been for several years now, the project grants, which is a sum of about $20,000 available for congregations to apply for a project grant, usually up to about $1,500 an application. One of the things that we have discovered over the past year or so is that the number of people applying for project grants has reduced. In fact, my understanding is to date they've only received grant applications for about $7,000 out of the 20. And so what we have done is we have put 10,000, we've stopped project grants. Mary Amato, who is the chair of the Project Grant Committee, has retired and expressed her need to retire from that ministry. She started been doing it for a long time now. So the decision was made at diocesan level to actually do away with the project grants, move 10,000 of that 20,000 for 2016 over to the operating grant. So that means instead of 140, we now have $150,000 available. The reason that's very helpful because, quite frankly, the average number of applications we get for operating grants is usually around about $180,000, $190,000. And one of the things we've been forecasting for a long time, for many, many years, it's always been the smaller congregations that have applied. And we've been saying it won't be long before the bigger ones do. Well, guess what? The bigger ones are now applying. So, you know, we've got 150,000 to play with. However, 10,000, the remaining 10,000 has gone into a special fund that actually will be managed by Bishop Scanlon and whoever else she's going to be working with, so that if there are any particular emergencies or something that can be addressed, and she will give you more information on that one. So the project grants, just for your own information, isn't happening. What else? I've got a whole cheat sheet here. As far as audit's concerned, you can find the audit on the last audit on the website. We got the best report we have had in years from the auditors for the work that we have done, or that Bill Graffis and Bonnie have done over the last several months. And that, I think, is pretty much about as much as I can say at this stage. You want to go line by line? That's right. I'm sorry.
I do not want to go line by line.
Thank you.
Just a question on the income side.
Yes.
Last year, after convention, we were notified of a slight tweak in the calculation of fair share, which actually reduced the fair share for pretty much everybody. Are we still using that tweaked formula, or are we returning to the original formula?
Where we are right now is exactly where we were. We have not changed. We have not changed anything.
So whatever the change was last year remains for 2016.
For the moment, let me just add that we've not had a chance yet to look at the fine details. But when you look at the fair share figure for 2016, you should find that it's very close to where it was for 2015. But we've not yet made the final determination because, frankly, we're still pulling information in to finalize. Okay, but that will certainly be ready.
My personal recommendation is you keep at least the tweak you made last year.
We understand. I feel the pain.
So, being in the position of wondering a great deal, I am wondering when the deficit goes down, is that because the income has gone up, or is that because the budget items have fallen out somewhere?
You'll find that out when it comes out.
Okay.
Okay? Let me state something very simply.
Okay.
Because you all know this as parishes, right? You have no control over your income. That depends on the individuals, right? That depends on your fair share. Now, we had a very good response to fair share, an exceedingly good response. But we also have to be realistic in terms of the diocese. realistic in terms of the parishes. So, you know, what we're trying to do is be responsible. And I'm not going to state categorically what's going to happen until we've all had a chance to look at it. We're trying to be very sensitive, right? But there are staff involved, there's buildings involved, there's ministries involved. And we really have to be very careful about how we look at those things. And that's why we've given a budget for Audrey to have the room to consider that stuff. We have the resources. So I like to say to folks, it's not as if we don't have any money. You know, we got 6 million in diocesan investments, right? So what she needs is time. It's what you would do with any rector of any parish. And that will then help us with the Council of Trustees to take some ideas of where we move forward. So I'm not going to state anything right now. Could I just remark something?
I'm wondering how this has impacted your work to move our convention from June to October.
My work or your work? My work. This work.
The finance.
I find out I'm spending an awful lot of time doing diocesan finances. The only change, I think, is how we begin to build a budget. You know, if when we used to have the convention in the spring, then we used to be working, what, about a year and a half behind when we were getting people to come in February. I know from my own experience on the Finance Committee and my colleagues on the Finance Committee, we're very cognizant of the fact that everybody keeps looking at us. And I keep saying, it ain't us. We do the number crunching. We don't make decisions about ministry. We don't make decisions about who gets what. That's the Council of Trustees and the Bishop and the Bishop's staff. What we need to do is provide the room that can happen. And the fact that the convention is happening in October for next year, I would think, we're going to be looking at 2017 probably in February. I think that's what we're going to be looking at, and inviting people to put their budgets into that time. Does that help? Okay, 1, 2, 3.
Is there a category that funds for seminarians? I noticed that we have a fund for our future bishop search, which of course we don't want to do anytime soon, but we do want to send seminarians to seminary at some point. Is there a line somewhere in there?
No. The history behind that used to go to Congregational Development Fund.
Okay.
Now, way back in 1900 and frozen to death, when the Congregational Development Department had the largest budget in this diocese. When I was chair of the department, we had a budget of $350,000. And that was in 2001, 2002, 3, something like that. And part of that $350,000 involved funding for seminarians, right? Also provided funding for curacies, so we could participate in those kinds of things. That isn't there anymore. In fact, quite frankly, the Congregational Development Department hasn't really done anything. Now, whether that will ever come back is a matter for the Bishop and the Council of Trustees and others to decide.
Thank you.
Kate led us through a whole series of resolutions, all of which seem to be focused on parishes developing interventions in the community of projects of one sort or another, and how you sponsor funding for projects. Is all of that unfunded mandate now?
Nobody was using it. And of the congregations, the operating grant committee last year, I think we gave funds to 18 congregations. Most of them most of them small congregations. I don't know what the average that we gave out, but we had $140,000. I think we were approving grants of the order of 7,000, 8,000, 9,000 or so for various congregations. One of the interesting things about the operating grant is that it really is there to help the congregation close the gap. That's the bottom line of it. But what we also say to the congregations is, we're looking at ministry. We're looking at you, we're asking you to look at ministry. So if this helps you do that, then it does. The project grants were only for $1,500 and no one was applying. So if it's just sitting there and it's been on the website for as long as I can think, then, we've got to do something with it. And that's what we've done. Now, that may change. I would think that one of the things may well happen is congregational development will begin to come back to life again. I don't know. I'm sorry.
Two questions, Steve. One is on the presentation of the budget. The way it's been presented has been a mission-based budget, which is wonderful to go out and sell what you're doing to people in the congregation. Frank, it's great for raising money. But it's junk when it comes to managing the business of the diocese. So my question is, rather than give us one budget, which would be staying as a mission budget, when will you give us two budgets where we see the management part as well as the mission part?
Okay, we'll try to do that. We're trying to move in that direction anyway. One of the things that we've tried to do is to separate out staff costs so you can see what the staff costs are. We're starting to bring things under specific ministries so you can see what that ministry costs in terms of program and so on. So, we can try to.
It needs to really be two separate worksheets. You can't do them in one.
David?
I just want to make a comment that the things that Lauren and Bud have raised in this other question, I think have to do with the question of what the role of the diocese is in the lives of the people in the congregations. And that's part of the agenda that I think we all should be thinking about and working with Audrey to help figure out what is that going to be like. And that, when we look at what that will be like, then we'll start to make some decisions about how the money that's collected by the diocese might be used. So for example, the question of what are we doing for leadership development in the diocese, and will we put funds behind that? It's one of the issues that I think as a diocese we should take into account and think about. Is that the role of a diocese? Is that one of the things that as a diocese what we do for one another in this context? So I think these questions are good ones, and I would encourage people to keep thinking of that and then engage one another in conversation around that so we can start this going and start to think about what is the mission and ministry of a diocese.
And I appreciate it, David, that's very helpful. Because it allows me to reiterate what I've been trying to say for the last 18 months, 2 years. The Finance Committee receives the budgets from the various departments. We don't create them, we receive them. And what's happened, and I don't know, well, I think I know how it's happened, but what's happened over the last several years is there's been sort of a creeping system whereby people have perceived the Finance Committee as a bunch of gnomes sitting around a table deciding who's going to get what. That's not what we do. And frankly, I don't want to do it. If you read the canons of the diocese, they are very clear. The Council of Trustees is the one responsible, along with the bishop. And they set the program. And they set the program where the people present what it is they have. That may change. Once that happens, then the Finance Committee receives that information and tries to pull a budget together. And from that budget, tries to work out what the fair share will be. Right? And then once the budget is approved, it goes back to council for approval. Once they've approved it, it goes back to the convention for approval. And then the Finance Committee have the right or have the authority to make minor changes as they happen.
Stephen, if you could just clarify the operating grants. When I first came to the diocese 12 years ago, they were monies requested by an individual parish to kind of balance the budget in many respects. And it was, as the word defines itself, operating. So it went to operating expenses, lights, heat, salaries, whatever. But lately that's changed, I think. The criteria, it goes to balance the budget, but it has to be identified for a specific ministry or project or, so if you could clarify that.
I will try. Yeah, I appreciate that. And frankly, Andy Francis just retired off the operating grant, co-chairmanship with me. And it was a difference that Andy and I continually sort of tried to struggle for clarity. The operating grant, I've always argued, has really been there to close the gap, because most of the congregations that are applying for it can't close the gap. But there was also this desire on the part of the then Congregational Development Department and the bishop and the canons of the ordinary to say, you know, we've got to be asking these congregations to look at this thing in terms of mission and ministry. And so one of the things that we have done over the years is we've made the application form much more comprehensive. We've asked for more information. We asked for parochial reports, whether the congregation has done a stewardship program, whether the congregation is reaching out to the wider community, and so on. And we've asked them to sort of frame the application in terms of ministry. What it isn't meant for, as it used to be sometimes confused with, and I once had an example where St. Paul's Lockheed, 2 or 3 years ago, applied for an operating grant because they wanted to put a sign up outside. And we said, you know, it's really more a project grant that you need, right? So maybe that's the direction you go in. We haven't worked that particular change out yet, we will. There are certain questions to be asked about the operating grant, and I'll put them on the table now, and I know Audrey and I have sort of played around with these things, but we've not gone into detail. One of the things that I think concerns me with the operating grant, and it really goes back to what David's been talking about, which is getting into a dialogue as a diocese in terms of how we look at it. And I'll give you an example. We had a congregation apply to the Finance Committee for a Darlington Fund grant. Darlington Fund is grant money that you can get for buildings and so on. There's not a lot of money in the Darlington Fund. I think it's about $300,000. They applied for a substantial sum of money. We asked for the usual application and the usual information and discovered that they had over $500,000 in the bank. So my question was, with all due respect, what are you asking me to give you $18,000 when you're sitting on $500,000? I would like to suggest that you borrow us, you lend us $18,000. You get the point? We have a system when we're dealing with operating grants now that we have whereby you are required, if you receive any diocesan financing in any way, whatever, you have to pay your fair share. So there's something not quite right if a congregation applies for an $8,000 operating grant and has to pay $8,000 fair share. Maybe we need to have that conversation. By the same token, those congregations that receive operating grants are saying those congregations that don't meet their full fair share are on a hidden grant. Maybe we need to look at that. There is a question when you're asking for an operating grant and you're sitting on substantial endowed funds, is there some other way we need to be looking at business? There are lots of questions that, frankly, as a diocese, we've not actually addressed. What's happened is that what used to be the mission grant has just sort of moved along. And I think it's really an invitation, now we have Audrey with us, to start a much deeper conversation about, so what does it mean to help these congregations? All of the grant applications we get, I think, are justified. But I'm also aware that we're getting more every year, and that will continue to increase. And it will involve larger congregations. I have received an email just this afternoon from a very large congregation asking whether they can apply for an operating grant. So this is a conversation we need to get into, and sooner than later. From the point of view of the Finance Committee, we receive what we get. I openly admit there is a conflict of interest. I am chair of the Finance Committee, I'm chair of the Operating Grant Committee, but quite frankly, because there's nobody else right out there at the moment that's doing it. So, does that help the question? Okay. 1, 2.
I would like to address the parish with the $500
into a grant, they need to identify whether the $500,000 is endowed, which means it cannot, the principal cannot be evaded, or whether it's invested, which would be able to be evaded.
We do that. We do that. We ask for full disclosure.
Yeah, and I think that's important, because just because you have the money in the bank may not mean that you can actually get it.
You could say the same thing with the diocese.
I just wanted to clarify, what percentage of the diocesan budget goes on to the national church as their fair share?
18%, I think. 18%. Goes to the fair share, diocese, fair share, yeah. That's decreasing. Not this year, but next year. And it will decrease over 3 years, down to whatever the figure was. 15.
Stephen, based on the conversation, I would just like to respectfully recommend that we consider not forgiving loans that have been given to bishops. As part of the financial statement, I'll read this. The diocese loaned to the bishop $75,000 to purchase a personal residence. The loan is unsecured and interest-free. The loan is payable on the sale of premises or within 6 months of retirement or in relinquishments of his duties as bishop. And then this line. This loan was forgiven in 2014. So that's a substantial amount of money. And I know we've had this discussion before, that there has been a precedent in this diocese. This isn't the first time this has happened. But I believe under the current circumstances, whoever needs to be made aware of that, we need to really reconsider those kinds of decisions.
We already have. And let me clarify to you, it was not 75,000 that was forgiven. The loan was for 75,000.
But that's what it says in the report.
He repaid 25,000 and 50,000 was forgiven. That was a decision made by the Standing Committee of the Diocese. And it was, as far as I'm aware, based on precedent. And we have already addressed that issue, or as I understand it, with the Standing Committee and with those people who are involved with the Finance Committee. That's something that, we just accept what we're told. But as far as I'm concerned, that won't happen.
Is that reported as under IRS regulation?
As far as I know it was, but I'm not sure. I'm not the tax person. That was a conversation that took place between the Treasurer and the Standing Committee of the Bishop. I don't know the content of that. Any other points? Oh, please do. I cannot reiterate and repeat too often enough. What we're trying to do in the Finance Committee of the Diocese is to be open and transparent and accountable. And personally, I think, and I'm biased, because it takes a lot of hours of my week, I think we've done that. We've still got some ways to go, but we have an exceedingly good committee now that are actually very proactive and really are managing the finances of the diocese well and arriving at a level of clarity in the budget that I think is commendable. And if you have questions, email me, email Bill Graffius, email anyone else on the Finance Committee. We're more than happy to come down and meet with us.
In my discussions with Bonnie Chambers, you guys have made phenomenal progress. I mean, in the endowment side, there was just no real understanding. For more than 10 years, the audit report says you need to explain what these funds are under responsibility. Now you're able to do that on the vast majority of them, which is just huge progress, not only in clarity, but in good stewardship and being able to use the money, because it makes an understanding of how much you can actually use, as Kathy Sabino was talking about. And so we're being good stewards, and your group has just done a wonderful job. I salute you for it, and I know it's incredible hard work, and I thank you for that.
I appreciate that.
This wasn't really a planned part of our program tonight, but as I've been sitting and listening to you and observing the conversation, I've been making lots of wild notes, so I'd like to share with you what I've been thinking. And as Tom said, the first thing I want to say is thank you to Stephen and Bonnie and Bill and the entire Finance and Investment Committees for this really long and hard work. So thank you. The second thing is just a general observation as we've been here tonight is that we've got a lot of energy around tiny little numbers and not much around the resolutions. And I just offer that up as an observation. I still have the benefit or the advantage, I guess, of being an outsider or a newcomer, maybe is a better word. And so one of the observations I've made is that, gee, we have some really super resolutions, but we're really more interested in talking about numbers. And I'm not making value judgment, just offering that up. I've been trained to think about any situation that I encounter along 4 different levels, if you will. One is, of course, the personal level of how we engage with each other. That's the interpersonal level. First is the personal level, around how I feel in a particular situation when I'm there. What am I feeling? What am I reacting to? How am I processing things? The second level is to talk about interpersonal. How are we working with each other, engaging with each other? The third is to talk about a cultural level, about what we're doing, say, about who we are as a people and a culture. In this case, the culture of the Episcopal Church in central Pennsylvania. And then the fourth level that I've been trained to study is at the institutional level. And so tonight, as we talk about the business of the church, to me what's particularly important is to think about the cultural level and the institutional level. And so I want to talk about some of the work I'll be doing in the next year in those levels, the things I'll be investigating as your bishop, as the newcomer, with those kind of fresh eyes. The first thing that I want to study, and this is in no particular order, is around the systems that we have set up. And an example of that is the Council of Trustees. How does that work? Why are some committees and commissions that we have, why are those attached to the Council of Trustees? Why are other things tucked away in other parts of our diocesan life? How does that work? What's the system that we have at play with the Council of Trustees? Another one, which you're all part of, is the convocation system. How does that work? How do the conveners and the co-conveners interact with you? What is the driving force of this? Do you only get together twice a year? And then we had the short time of the deans that were appointed, and that we're going to take a break on those for next year, mostly because they weren't funded, and take a look at what do we need in terms of regional systemic or systems. So that's an example of the systemic work that I want to do and investigate. The second is around program. Now I know that you set, I believe, a convention 3 or 4 years ago, some diocesan priorities. One is about communication, another is about children and youth and their formation. How are we, as a diocese, living into the priorities that we've set for our programmatic life? So I want to investigate in this year of discovery and listening with all of you, what are the priorities today? What are the program needs that you have? And that really falls down to the parish level. What's happening at St. Edward's? That you need support your diocesan budget and staff. The third thing I'll be investigating and discovering is around administration. We have 6 or 7 folks employed at the diocesan house. The way that their jobs are put together is quite interesting and unique in some ways. It's a little bit of a jigsaw puzzle. So I want to kind of pull that apart and say, who's doing what here? How did that happen? Whose gifts are being best used? And what are the needs? Do we have all the right people in place and all the right job functions to serve the needs of the diocese? And when I say the diocese, what I really mean is all of us. And then the fourth place that I'm very interested in exploring is around the capital expenses that we have. And particularly, this budget has, I think, $17,000 put towards upkeep of the diocesan house, $75,000 in taxes that we pay for property, and that's a bit further down the road, but I think that we need to take a good look at the capital expenses that we have and begin to explore those a little bit. So those are some of the places I'll be doing some discovery work in systems, programs, administration, and capital expenses. I want to say a couple other things. I want to talk about funding projects. Stephen talked about reducing the project grant money, increasing somewhat the operational grant money, and this third sort of mystery pot of money that we have. That mystery pot of money is being funded partially by the collection from the consecration on Saturday. The money that we receive on Saturday in the plate will go half to Episcopal Relief and Development, and the other half is this mystery pot, which apparently I have control over. What I'm really interested in, as you know, from the walkabouts and the election process and all the stuff that I wrote, is not in coming to you with a fully formed vision, but spending these next couple of years listening and discerning a vision together, and finding out how we can be faithful and follow God where God is leading us. And I'm pretty sure, the way I've been listening in the last several years, is that God is not leading us back to the 1950s, to the heyday of the church, but that God's leading us to a new place that we don't even know what that looks like yet. Some of the words that are being used are missional and missional experiments, doing church differently, the Fresh Expressions movement from England, which now is probably a decade old at least. But we're being called to be church in a new way. And so that little pot of money that I've got, I hope to share with you in doing and encouraging missional experiments, being church in a new way, outside of our doors in community. One of the resolutions we have talks about that a little bit. So that's some of the projects that I'm interested in funding with that money. And I said to Stephen and Bonnie and Bill, I have never seen a diocese that has money put aside in its diocesan convention budget to support the operating income of congregations. That's extraordinary. What that says to me, whether you know it or not, again, newcomer's eyes, what that says to me is that you care enough about each other to give of yourselves for each other. It sounds kind of Christian to me. I come from a very large diocese where there was not a nickel given to support operating income or operating grants of congregations. It was sink or swim. And so this, to me, sends a very important message, regardless of the amount really in the final. And then finally, I'll just give you a little bit of a tease. I think this will be coming out pretty soon in a letter from Bill Graffius. But one of the financial things that I'm very interested in, 2 things, in exploring in the next year specifically is around the fair share. That to me is a holy mystery. Calculation is learning about fair share and what our options are regarding that. And expecting tiny congregations to do audits that they can't afford, so they don't do them, and then we don't have any kind of sense of how we have internal controls or how money is being regulated in congregations. Because frankly, we're not receiving a lot of audits from churches that can't afford them. So I want to dig into the whole idea, even though it's canonically by our general church canons required that we do audits. What are ways that we can support each other in getting that work done? So those are my two little trailers, coming attractions. Now this was completely spontaneous. I'm afraid to ask if there are any questions because I don't really have any answers. I don't know what I told you. But if there are questions or responses, I'd be happy to field them. Yes?
Actually, there are two ways you can get audited. Most nonprofits have a review.
Yes.
Which is a little less expensive, it's less onerous, and to do a review is a much upgraded search through your business of the year.
Called agreed upon procedures, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think that could be an option for us.
So I think that may be a good option because it will, even if small parishes do have a review committee, that then it puts everyone's feet right.
Right. Yes. All right, yeah.
So you said a portion of that will pot goes to the ERD, then it would be sent to ERDs or ERD?
The big ERD. When I was asked where I wanted the money to go, I thought ERD, big ERD for their use, but also to keep some here to do our own mission work. Yes?
Do you think it's a possibility to have diocesan auditors, HE
Diocesan what?
auditors,
Auditors.
to visit a parish, collect their stuff, scurry back to their desk, do the audit, issue a report, this is what you're doing right, this is what you're doing wrong?
I think there's lots of options that I don't even know about because I don't pretend to be able to play a CPA, but yeah, we're going to dig into that and figure out what the options are. And that's one of them. Yes, Raylan.
Generally, not about money, but generally, I was watching you during Bishop Douglas's sermon. And I wanted to ask you what it means to you, what it will mean to us to work together, that we are not thinking about our mission, but that we are doing participating in our mission.
I think that, did everybody hear the question? Raylan wanted to know that she said that she was watching me during Bishop Douglas's sermon at the consecration on Saturdays. He spoke about the first thing and the most important thing being participating in God's mission rather than believing that we have our own mission or our own agenda, even as well-intentioned Christians that we would be doing this, that it's really not our mission, it's God's mission. This is a refrain that actually there was a little poll going among those of us who know Bishop Douglas to guess how many times he was going to use the phrase God's mission during the sermon. I guessed 17, but the answer was 24. I lost the bet. I think that sort of the Kool-Aid I've been drinking, and I think it's a really good Kool-Aid for the last 5 or 6 years working with Ian, is that the church, and I use this phrase, and I think I made it up in my sermon on Sunday, the church to me is God's vehicle of institutional grace. The church is something that we have created to do God's work and to shelter and harbor and be God's people. But really the work is God's work, as Ian said. And And so this raises questions about sustainability of congregations. It raises questions about the best use of resources. It raises questions, I was talking to one of our deacons today, around even how we identify ourselves. You know, we talk so much about outreach. And what I'm really interested in, outreach does this, right? Outreach says that here we are, and we're reaching out to you folks, and giving you something. But everybody in this room who's participated in any engagement in outreach, I think you know that you get as much as you give. Maybe it's a different sort of currency or commodity. So I want to do away with the word outreach and talk about doing mission, because the work that we're doing is God's work, and we are engaged with each other, receiving as much as we do. So I don't know, that's a jumble of thoughts. Other questions, comments? Yes, you look like you're about to say something. No. Yes?
When the guy told you on Saturday not to fall into the trap of trying to solve the diocese problems, and here you stand before us tonight trying to solve the diocese problems. Did you not understand the statement?
I was just counting how many times he said God's mission. Well, you know, I'm glad that you raised that, and I want to say that when I read the profile for this diocese, and when I had my first interview on the phone, on the Skype with Charlotte and Richard Wall, Charlotte Weaver-Gelser and Richard Wall, I got off the phone, I thought, they want me to come fix them. And I don't know how to do that. And it was a real fear of mine through the whole election process that you were going to be electing somebody who would come in and be able to fix you even. And part of the beauty of last weekend was hearing how much you all love me, and part of my deepest fear, to be perfectly transparent with you, is that I can't do it. Boy, if I had a nickel for every time somebody says to me, you are just what we need, we wouldn't have a deficit. But the truth is that all I can do is to raise the issues. What I'm hoping to do is not present you with solutions, but to say, I'm going to pull this stuff apart. I can be that person to pull it apart and explore it with you. Get all the pieces out on the table and look at it. And I have enough institutional and management experience that I'm good at pulling stuff apart, and I hope I'm good enough about gathering the people with the gifts and the skills to put it back together in a way that makes sense for us as we go forward. So I'm not going to fix it.
Sounds like it's going to fix it to do it regularly.
We're all going to fix it.
Yes.
Yes.
No. It's hard for you to fix it. All we need to do is determine what direction we want to go. And do that.
Yes.
One of the things that you observed early on is very true. It's been my experience for a long time in this diocese. We do care deeply for one another. And I appreciate the fact that you noticed that very quickly. And I think from there, we can only honor God in continuing to care for one another.
One of the best things that that's happened to me since I've been here are these 6 meet and greet events that took place. Because what it gave me, and the rim pick also, what it gave me a chance to see is how you interact and engage with each other. And you really do love each other. And you do really do care for each other. And I want to build on that. Absolutely. Well, I'm supposed to be doing closing statements or something, right? Closing, that's the agenda. Closing remarks. I think I've remarked much. But I'm curious if my opening invitation to you around keeping an eye on Spirit has moved in us tonight. Anybody would be brave enough to share a response to that? Yes.
I thought the resolutions were totally exciting and enlivening and challenging and fun and spirit-filled and uninspiring.
Yes.
We discussed the resolutions at our mission justice meetings and games, and we are so on board with everything that's there. So we're very excited about that. So the fact there wasn't a lot of discussion here, what they were presented, does not indicate there's not a lot of excitement.
That's great. I'll be interested to see on the resolutions next year, with a number of them, the energy around it shifts, because it's not a convention year, not a general convention year. That'll be interesting. Yes.
Martha's willingness to step up and help run the projection when Robin couldn't or shouldn't have had to do 10 things at once. It was God working in her.
Thank you. And the Holy Spirit moving in you. Anyone else? Yes.
I just feel like, let's get to work.
Let's get to work. Good. Charlotte.
I like integration, and I could hear the connection between the finance discussion that actually kind of went down to the creative place of the grants, and Bud's comment that here's something more than just operating here's project. In those resolutions, there is opportunity for reimagining how we participate, how we give it out, how we work on those projects, not just parish by parish, but reimagine how to approach any of these projects with money and with the number of parishes who are interested in various things. So,
I continue to be struck by how what we're doing in this diocese parallels what's happening in the national church. With the election of Michael Curry as the first African American, and now just with your election and installation as the first female bishop of the diocese. And I was honored to serve as deputy president, and I was a brand new. I didn't know anything about the process, and I was glad to have Casey, your leadership, as head of our team. And the fact that the resolutions locally are generating this kind of excitement is really our hope and our prayer. Because there's so much energy and excitement around the national level. We can imbue the diocesan convention, the diocese overall, with that same level of excitement. Some of the new structures and policies that emanate from these resolutions once they're adopted, I think that we're really on the path to moving God's way.
Something I'm struggling to put into kind of words in my head, even to know how to express it, but there's a sense that I feel, and I think it may have started with the search committee, and it's being carried through with the way you're approaching this, that we're engaging with one another in ways that are life-giving and energizing, in ways that I have not experienced before in this diocese, and in terms of general way of approach, and looking at ourselves not as a navel-gazing activity, but rather as a way to look at how are we doing what we're doing, and in a way pulling together the pieces that we need to. And I'm not sure if I'm even making any sense, but there's just a feeling that I have that I really appreciate, and I think that's, in response to your question, with the spirit moving, I think that's what I like.
Well, thank you all for being here and welcoming me and doing this work. It's God's work. All right. Martha, since you're doing the closing prayer, is it going to last 12 minutes?
Two announcements. One, and I'm not sure what it means, there's an agenda item for the Episcopal Home flyer, and do you know where that is? Or okay, I know there are some congregations here that do apply for the operating grant. Don't fret, the applications have not gone out yet. They will be going out in the next couple of weeks at most. What I would be asking you to do is that doesn't stop you getting together with your vestries, your own finance committees, and starting to pull together your budget for next year and what you're likely to be needing, because that information is going to be needed when you get the application, and we usually we usually aim for the beginning of December to make the final determination in terms of who gets what. So although the forms are not out, they will be out soon, but please start the process.
Well, thank you all for coming. As co-convener, I've been given the privilege of closing out our conversation with prayer. I just wanted to thank Bishop Audrey for once again having a first here in Lancaster for the Lancaster Convocation. The first walkabout was at St. Thomas. The first picnics were in the Rib and then at St. Thomas, and now your first convocation. So we're proud to be part of the diocese and always grateful to have you come visit us in Lancaster. I think this has been a really good discussion, and I think it whets our appetite for what will be a really exciting convention as well. To close this out, I just felt called to share the Collect for Peace from our evening prayer. There have been 3 more shootings. Innocent people are dying in the streets of Lancaster. And I think as God's peacemakers, we need to be ever mindful of our role. So will you join me in prayer? The Lord be with you. And also with you. Most holy God, the source of all good desires, all right judgments, and all just works. Give to us, your servants,